and boy, did Saquon Barkley do it right. You go to a new team, you say you want to win a championship, you break some records along the way. That's what he did this season. But he wasn't the only team, or the only player, I should say, with a team in his first year and be successful. We saw Sam Darnold mostly be good with the Vikings up in Minnesota. Josh Jacobs had a renaissance up there for the Packers. And, of course, how could we forget what Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson did up there in Baltimore this season? Tyler Sullivan back with us here on HQ Spotlight. Now, Tyler, we just talked about some of these guys who had a great first year, but then there were some other guys who maybe had those same expectations and didn't quite pan out. So maybe we're looking for a refresh, a fresh start for some of these guys. Naturally, we got to start with Cooper Kupp because we just got the Matt Stafford news that he's sticking around L.A. Cooper was very honest when the season ended and saying the team's going to trade me. This is kind of it in L.A. I'm wondering, though, Tyler, is there a world where maybe now that his bestie Matt Stafford is sticking around, we can figure out a way to keep him? Or do you think it's time for these two parties, I should say, to part ways?
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Cooper Kupp does stay in Los Angeles. Like, it does feel like the Cooper Kupp news kind of popped off the Matthew Stafford frustration and him possibly looking at another team. Obviously, as we just talked about, he's going back to Los Angeles. Maybe part of those talks was to say, hey, listen, I'll come back, but keep my guy. You know, I want to keep Cooper Kupp involved. As much as I love Puka Nacua, I want to keep Cooper Kupp. But ultimately, the team did say prior to all the Matthew Stafford stuff that they were going to move off of Cooper Kupp from financial reasons, maybe phasing out of the offense. It did feel like it was increasingly becoming more Puka Nacua-centric and less so about Cooper Kupp. There were a couple of games there where it felt like he got like 1 target, 0 catches. If you were a fantasy manager, like, where is Cooper Kupp? But ultimately, I do think that if they are going to move off of him, he will have a lot of success and a lot of suitors across the NFL. I think that, you know, the New England Patriots are a team. I'm up here around Boston. That's a team that's certainly been on the radar for Cooper Kupp to pair with Drake May as he develops into year 2. I think that would give him an opportunity to get the lion's share of targets. It would help a young team that is starved for wide receiver help to bolster that room. I think the Washington Commanders are a team that needs another wide receiver opposite of Terry McLaurin. The other one that I've been pointing to is the Cincinnati Bengals. They're a team that knows Cooper Kupp quite well. He won a Super Bowl MVP against them a few years ago. If they ultimately do decide to move off of T. Higgins, and right now it's looking increasingly unlikely that they're going to move off of him, but let's say that they do let him enter free agency, they're going to need another wide receiver, and I think Cooper Kupp would be a fascinating addition to pair with Jamar Chase and put alongside Joe Burrow.
You did not mention my Dallas Cowboys, so I'm just going to assume that you forgot that we just didn't have time to get into it. I personally would love to see him opposite of CeeDee Lamb, but a girl can dream, right? Let's get into another wide receiver who, at one point, Tyler, Davante Adams was the dude, right? When he was up in Green Bay, everyone wanted them on their fantasy team, and obviously he's still got the juice, but it just didn't work out for him up there in New Jersey. Another guy as well in Breece Hall who had really high potential but has since fizzled off. Where are some places where you can see those guys leave, especially since they don't have a quarterback up in the Jets right now?
Yeah, that's the question, right? You know, with the New York Jets moving off of Aaron Rodgers, bringing in a new regime with Aaron Glenn as the new head coach, they need to figure out what they are. And clearly, Davante Adams was an Aaron Rodgers guy. I don't know if you guys know this, but they played together a couple of times in their NFL careers. It's crazy, right? I didn't know that either. But you'd have to think that wherever Aaron Rodgers goes, that's clearly going to be a team that we pencil in for Davante Adams. Does he follow him, like we were talking about earlier, maybe across the hall at MetLife Stadium to the New York Giants? Does he go down to the New Orleans Saints as a possible pairing with Derek Carr from their days in college and obviously with the Las Vegas Raiders? There's going to be a bunch of options, I think, for Davante Adams. I referenced the Washington Commanders earlier. I think that would be interesting as well. And as we talk about Breece Hall, and Haley, here you go. What about the Dallas Cowboys for Breece Hall? They clearly need help at running back, one of the worst running games in the NFL last year. Breece Hall is entering the final year of his rookie deal, and the New York Jets have drafted running backs twice last year, Braylon Allen being one of them, really promising big running back, and Breece Hall had a really good 2023 and okay 2024. He actually had 30 fewer touches this season than he did the year before. It's a new regime. did not draft him. Now we're talking about possibly extending him as he goes into a lame duck season. That feels ripe to me for a trade. And if you're the Dallas Cowboys, I know we talk about Ashton Genty at the NFL draft, but we were talking about it a couple of days ago. Maybe you go offensive line there with Martin now retiring, and you trade for a running back, a young running back like Breece Hall.
Tyler, it's almost like you opened my diary and you read exactly what my wishes were for the Dallas Cowboys, and that would be to take an offensive line with that 12th pick and then wait for a running back later on. I'm leaning Quinshon Judkins, but Breece Hall is a great option too. So we're right here. We're on the same page. Let's see if we can keep it going here as we talk about the Falcons, because boy, things look really weird right now, much more so than they did a year ago. A year ago, they signed Kirk Cousins to this massive deal. It was the Kyle Pitts renaissance, and now both of those guys kind of find themselves in no man's land. We don't really know what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins, with Michael Penix set to take over. Kyle Pitts has kind of been this guy who we expected to be a generational talent, but just hasn't found his way in Atlanta. So what do you think? Where do we see these two guys finishing their careers?
Yeah, Kirk Cousins is going to be interesting because it feels like it's going to play out a little bit longer than I think that Kirk Cousins would like it to be, because you heard from the front office over the last couple of weeks and months that they're kind of okay with possibly him being the backup, which is crazy. But you look at the money there, $65 million to release him, even $38 million to trade him would be a lot to swallow there. But if you have an unhappy backup quarterback, well, then it's just going to make life so much more difficult for Michael Penix. And he's clearly going to be the future at that position. You draft him in the first round, you make the move mid-season off of Kirk Cousins to have him start the year. It's the Michael Penix show in Atlanta. The question is, what happens now with Kirk Cousins? I ultimately do think that they trade him. Now the question is, where does he go? It's kind of a mystery, because I feel like we're going to get to this game of musical chairs of Matt Stafford going back to Los Angeles. Aaron Rodgers, where does he go? Does he go to the New York Giants? Is that opening now for the New York Jets to possibly go get Kirk Cousins? What about the Las Vegas Raiders? They need a quarterback. Do they go down the Kirk Cousins route if they can't get a quarterback either via free agency or via trade? So to me, it's kind of up in the air right now as to where he's going to go, but certainly it's going to result in not being in Atlanta. And then lastly, with Kyle Pitts, it just feels like, and you referenced this, just a waste of an opportunity for what we felt like was going to be the next Travis Kelce, George Kittle, upper echelon tight end. It just never materialized for Kyle Pitts in Atlanta the way that it materialized in year one for Brock Bowers in Las Vegas. That's kind of what we were hoping to see from a freak talent like Kyle Pitts. I certainly have, as I drafted him in fantasy a few years. It just was, not good for anybody involved. My question is, what happens next for him? The one team that I thought was going to be really interesting was if Travis Kelce retired, the Kansas City Chiefs would be a team that I thought would really make a lot of sense. But again, I don't know if the Falcons are going to double down with that decision, with him going into his fifth-year option, signing him to an extension. That feels like more of a trade than anything else.
Jacqueline was to my left, a fellow Florida grad, and as you were talking about Kyle Pitts, she's shaking her head.
I have also drafted him many a times, Tyler, just, because I'm obviously a Florida Gator apologist. So I'm like, it's coming, and it hasn't. And I'm right there with you, my friend, in terms of fantasy.
We are still waiting. All right, so let's move on from Kyle Pitts and talk about Mark Andrews, a guy who has been so reliable up in Baltimore. I went back, Tyler, just to watch the game where he had the big drop, just to sort of take me back to that moment. And I can imagine he's done that several times too. When you think about just what his career has been up in Baltimore and thinking about a potential split there, is there a world where we could see Mark Andrews not repping the Ravens?
Yeah, I do. And it's a real shame, too, because I think that that's going to kind of define his last act here with the Baltimore Ravens. But he has been a remarkable figure for most of his tenure. It was an up-and-down year in 2024, obviously ended with a poor performance in the postseason. But I do think entering the final year of his contract, the fact that they have Isaiah Likely already in-house as an option to kind of take over as tight end one, I think there's a potential of moving on. A team that I would look at if I were in the Mark Andrews business or looking for some help and looking at Mark Andrews would be the Washington Commanders. We saw what Zach Ertz was able to do with Jayden Daniels last year, second on the team in receptions, second on the team in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. You put Mark Andrews in that spot, I think you get similar production, if not better.
Okay. Shout out to Zach Ertz, by the way. I feel like we didn't talk about him enough.